The door to Professor Samuel Hargrove's office slammed open like a gunshot in the dead of night, splintering the fragile silence I'd built around my crumbling world. Rain hammered the window panes of this creaky old Harvard building, mirroring the storm raging in my chest as I stumbled in, soaked to the bone, my backpack thudding to the floor like an accusation. "I can't do this anymore," I gasped, the words tearing out of me before I could stop them, my voice cracking like thunder over the Charles River. "Everything's falling apart. My grades, my head, all of it, and if you don't help me, Professor, I swear I'll jump from that goddamn bridge tonight." Professor Samuel Hargrove didn't flinch. He was perched on the edge of his desk, sleeves rolled up to his elbows, a half-empty tumbler of bourbon in one hand that caught the lamplight like liquid fire. At 45, he was the kind of man who looked carved from New England granite, tall, broad-shouldered, with salt and pepper hair that fell just so over his forehead and eyes the color of a nor'easter sky, sharp and unyielding. But tonight, in the dim glow of his desk lamp, those eyes softened as they locked onto mine, seeing straight through the bullshit I'd been piling up all semester. "Joshua," he said, his voice low and steady, like the rumble of a freight train you feel in your bones before you hear it. "Sit down before you drown us both." I collapsed into the worn leather armchair across from him, water pooling at my feet on the Persian rug that probably cost more than my mom's yearly rent back in Ohio. My hands trembled as I yanked the soaked syllabus from my bag, slamming it onto his desk amid the chaos of dog-eared philosophy tomes and scribbled lecture notes. Existentialism 301, Kierkegaard, Nietzsche, all those dead white guys who'd never had to scrape by on ramen and student loans while pretending their hearts weren't shattering under the weight of it all. I jabbed at the paper, my voice rising. "This is why I'm here. I bombed the midterm. I can't focus. My roommate's dealing coke out of our dorm. My girlfriend, ex-girlfriend, dumped me for some frat boy, and every night I lie there staring at the ceiling, wondering if anyone's ever really seen me. Not the straight-A Joshua from the Midwest, but me." He set the bourbon down with deliberate slowness, the glass clinking against the wood like a gavel falling. Leaning forward, elbows on his knees, he studied me, not with the detached pity I'd braced for, but with something fiercer, more intimate. The air between us thickened, charged like the atmosphere before a lightning strike. I'd always noticed him in lectures, the way he'd pace the front of the amphitheater, his voice weaving through Camus' absurdities like he was confessing his own sins, the faint scent of sandalwood and old books clinging to him like a second skin. But up close, in this shoebox of an office with its walls lined floor to ceiling in mahogany shelves groaning under the weight of forgotten tomes, he was overwhelming, magnetic, dangerous. "Joshua Ellis," he murmured, my full name rolling off his tongue like he'd been practicing it in the dark. "You're not invisible. Not to me." His gaze dropped to my hands, still fisted in my lap, then back up, lingering a beat too long on my mouth. Heat flooded my face, a flush that had nothing to do with the chill seeping from my wet clothes. What the hell was this? I come for salvation, extra credit, tutoring, anything to salvage my GPA and keep my scholarship from evaporating like Boston fog. Not this. Whatever this was. He stood then, crossing the room in 2 strides to a sideboard where a battered coffee maker hummed like a distant beehive. Pouring a mug, black, no sugar, just how I took it in his class, he handed it to me, his fingers brushing mine. Electricity. A spark that jolted straight to my core, making my breath hitch. "Drink," he commanded softly. "Then talk." All of it. No filters. And God help me, I did. Words spilled out like the rain outside, about growing up in a Rust Belt town where faggot was the first slur I learned, about burying my confusion under layers of football games and church youth groups, about arriving at Harvard wide-eyed and desperate to prove I belonged, only to feel more like an imposter than ever. About the ex, Emily, who'd called me distant before ghosting me for Chad the lacrosse god. About the gnawing ache in my chest that no amount of all-nighters or keg stands could drown. Samuel listened, really listened, nodding at the right moments, his face a map of quiet storms. When I finished, the mug was empty, the rain a steady drum against the glass, and the clock on his wall ticked past midnight. "You're carrying too much," he said finally, sinking back into his chair. "Alone. That's the real absurd, thinking you have to." He paused, rubbing a hand over his jaw, the stubble rasping under his palm. "What if I told you I know exactly how that feels? The isolation. The fear of being known." My heart stuttered. There it was again, that pull, like gravity shifting under my feet. "You, Professor Hargrove, the guy who quotes Sartre like it's small talk? What could you possibly—" "Samuel," he interrupted, the correction gentle but firm. "In here, it's Samuel." He leaned back, the lamplight carving shadows across his cheekbones. "I came out at 22. In the 90s. AIDS crisis raging. Reagan's America pretending we didn't exist. Lost friends. Family. Tenure track offers dried up faster than my metaphors in a bad lecture." A wry smile tugged at his lips, but it didn't reach his eyes. "I've rebuilt. But the scars? They're why I teach this shit. To remind kids like you that the leap of faith isn't about blind trust. It's about jumping anyway. Kids like you." The words hung there, heavy with implication. I swallowed hard, my throat dry despite the coffee. "So, what now? Extra essays? Office hours till dawn?" He chuckled, a low sound that vibrated through me. "Something like that. But first..." He rose again, this time locking the office door with a soft click that echoed like a vow. My pulse thundered in my ears. "Let me show you what help really looks like." What happened next blurred the line between lifeline and freefall. Samuel didn't touch me. Not yet. But he crossed to the window, drawing the heavy velvet curtains against the storm-swept yard. The room shrank, intimate as a confessional. He pulled a bottle of aged scotch from a lower drawer, pouring 2 fingers into mismatched tumblers etched with faded Harvard crests. "To absurdities," he toasted, clinking his glass to mine. The liquor burned going down, warm and forbidden, loosening the knots in my shoulders. We talked for hours, the conversation meandering from Kierkegaard's Night of Faith to the raw poetry of Ginsberg, whose howl I'd confessed to stealing glances at in the campus library's restricted section. Samuel's laugh was rare, a gravelly thing that made my skin prickle. He shared fragments of himself. A failed marriage to a woman he'd loved like a brother, the quiet affairs with grad students that ended in whispers and regrets, the therapy sessions where he'd finally named the loneliness that dogged him like a shadow. "It's not about labels, Joshua," he said, his voice dropping to a hush. "It's about hunger. For connection. For someone who sees the mess and stays." By 2 a.m., the rain had eased to a drizzle, and exhaustion tugged at my eyelids. But I didn't want to leave. This office, this man, it was the first place in months that felt like solid ground. "Thank you," I whispered, standing to gather my things. "For everything." His hand caught my wrist as I reached for the door, light, tentative, but enough to stop me cold. "Stay," he breathed, the word laced with something raw and unguarded. "Just a little longer." I turned, our faces inches apart, his breath mingling with mine, scotch and mint and unspoken want. Time fractured. And then, with the slowness of a man testing fragile ice, Samuel leaned in, his lips brushing mine in a kiss that was equal parts question and claim. Soft at first, exploratory, then deepening as I leaned into it, my hands fisting in his shirt. It was like coming home to a house you'd only dreamed of. Terrifying, exhilarating, right? We broke apart gasping, foreheads pressed together. "Joshua," he murmured against my skin, "this. We can't." But we did. The desk became our altar, papers scattering like fallen leaves as clothes shed in a frenzy of need. His hands mapped me, strong, reverent, tracing the freckles across my shoulders, the curve of my spine, as if committing me to memory. I tasted salt on his neck, felt the tremor in his thighs as I explored him in turn, bold and uncharted. It wasn't just sex. It was absolution, two souls colliding in the quiet rebellion of touch. When it ended, we lay tangled on the rug, his heartbeat syncing with mine under the watchful eyes of dusty philosophers. Dawn crept in, gray and unforgiving, painting the room in hues of regret. "This changes everything," Samuel said, propping himself on an elbow, his fingers tracing idle patterns on my chest. "Yeah," I agreed, voice hoarse. But maybe that's the point. Little did I know, the real storm was just breaking. The weeks that followed were a fever dream wrapped in flannel and fog, the kind of illicit rhythm that pulses through Cambridge's cobblestone streets like a secret heartbeat. By day, I was still Joshua Ellis, the lanky sophomore from Dayton, dodging tea stops and cramming for midterms in the undergrad library's fluorescent glare. But at night, or in the stolen slivers between lectures, I became something else, Samuel's. We'd meet in his office after hours, the door locked against the world, or slip away to his off-campus apartment in Somerville, a converted Victorian with creaking floorboards and windows overlooking the Mystic River. There, amid the scent of aged leather and fresh-ground coffee, we'd unravel each other like forbidden texts. It started innocently enough. A brush of hands in the back row during his Tuesday seminar on Heidegger's Being and Time. A note slipped into my returned essay, "Dacian suits you." Coffee? S. I'd show up at the Diesel Cafe in Davis Square, nursing a flat white while he dissected my fears with the precision of a surgeon. "You're authentic, Joshua," he'd say, his boot nudging mine under the table. "Don't let the masks fool you. Authentic." The word lodged in my chest like a promise, chasing away the ghosts of my closeted adolescence. Our first real date, if you could call it that, wasn't planned. It was a Thursday in late October, leaves carpeting the quad in crimson and gold, the air crisp with the promise of frost. I'd bombed a practice exam in econ, the numbers blurring into taunts of failure, and texted him in a haze of panic. "Can't breathe." "Yard?" He appeared like a specter from the stacks, coat slung over one arm, thermos in hand. We walked the winding paths, past the John Harvard statue slick with pigeon shit, until we reached the edge of the river, where the willows dipped like weary lovers. "Sit," he commanded, spreading his coat on the damp grass. We shared spiked cider from the thermos, his contraband from a faculty Halloween mixer, and watched the sun dip behind the boathouses, turning the water to molten copper. That's when he told me about Elias. his ex, a painter from Provincetown with hands like sandpaper and a laugh that could shatter glass. They'd met in the 90s, during Samuel's brief stint teaching at NYU, two queers navigating the wreckage of Stonewall's aftershocks. He left because I couldn't commit, Samuel confessed, voice rough as the gravel under our feet. Too scared of losing everything I'd clawed back, I took his hand, calloused from years of gripping chalk and metaphor. And now, his eyes met mine, stormy and sure. Now, I'm all in. He kissed me there, under the open sky. No locked doors or shadowed corners, just us, exposed and alive. A jogger whistled as he passed, but Samuel didn't pull away. That boldness, that quiet defiance, it hooked me deeper than any hook line in his syllabus. Back in his apartment that night, we cooked badly. I burned the risotto while he chopped garlic with the focus of a man defusing a bomb, the kitchen filling with smoke and laughter. Over plates of charred grains and decent red wine, he opened up about his family. A Baptist father in rural Vermont who'd disowned him after finding a dog-eared copy of The Joy of Gay Sex in his dorm room. A mother who'd sent birthday cards in secret, her script trembling with unsaid apologies. Humanity's our redemption, he said, clinking his glass to mine. Not perfection. Sex with Samuel was revelation. Not the frantic release of my fumbling college hookups, but a dialogue slow, deliberate, attuned to every gasp and arch. He'd whisper philosophy into my skin. This is the leap, Joshua, into the absurd joy of being. I'd trace the faint scar on his ribs, a memento from a bar fight in Chelsea during his wilder years, and feel the weight of his history in every shiver. We were tender, then fierce, vulnerable, then voracious. Afterward, tangled in sheets that smelled of him, sandalwood and starch, we'd talk until the city lights blurred into dawn. But cracks formed, subtle as hairline fractures in porcelain. Whispers in the department lounge about Hargrove's favorite, sidelong glances from TAs who lingered too long in his office. My roommate, Tyler, caught me sneaking back at 4 a.m. One morning, reeking of smoke and satisfaction. Dude, you look wrecked. Who's the girl? I lied, mumbled something about a study group, but the guilt gnawed like acid. Harvard was a pressure cooker of privilege and pretense. Coming out here meant risking scholarships, reputations, the fragile illusion of belonging. Then came Thanksgiving. Samuel invited me to his sister's in Concord, a sprawling colonial with turkey and tension thick as gravy. No pressure, he said over the phone, his voice crackling from the bad reception. Just pie and bad football. I went, heart pounding like a bass drum. His sister, Rebecca, was a high school English teacher with Samuel's eyes and none of his walls. She hugged me at the door, called me the brilliant one from class, and didn't blink when Samuel's hand found the small of my back. Dinner was chaos. Nephews chasing the dog, her husband debating politics with Samuel until voices rose like steam from the mashed potatoes. Under the table, our knees touched, an anchor in the storm. Later, by the fireplace, embers popping like distant gunfire, Rebecca pulled me aside. He's been alone too long, she whispered, pressing a slice of pumpkin pie into my hand. Don't break him, Joshua. Or let him break you. Her words lingered as we drove back through the dark. Samuel's hand on my thigh, the radio crooning Springsteen, trapped in the belly of this horrible machine. I pushed the warning down, buried it under the thrill of stolen weekends. We escaped to Provincetown over break, renting a dune shack cottage where the Atlantic roared like applause. Days blurred into salt-stung walks on Race Point Beach. Nights into bonfires where we'd burn driftwood and inhibitions. He sketched me in charcoal, my body arched against the weathered shingles, capturing the vulnerability I'd never shown anyone. "You're my absurd hero," he'd say, smudging the lines with his thumb. But on the drive back, as the Sagamore Bridge arched over the Cape Cod Canal, my phone buzzed. A text from Emily. "Heard you're seeing someone. Careful, Harvard eats queers for breakfast." Attached was a photo, me, slipping from Samuel's office at dawn, blurry but unmistakable. My stomach plummeted. "How? Who?" Samuel noticed my silence, pulled over at a rest stop overlooking the marshlands. "Talk to me." I showed him the pic, hands shaking. "This is out there. Everyone will know." He studied it, jaw tight. "Then let them. We're not hiding, Joshua. Not anymore." But fear is a sly beast. Coiled in my gut, whispering of lost futures, of being the Midwestern boy sent packing. That night, in his bed, as he loved me with a desperation that bordered on prayer, I held him tighter, willing the world to stay at bay. Yet even then, I felt the tide turning, subtle, inexorable, pulling us toward the rocks. Winter clamped down on Boston like a vice, the Charles freezing into a jagged mirror that reflected my fracturing resolve. Snow blanketed the yard in hush, muffling the footsteps of co-eds bundled against the bite, but it couldn't silence the rumors slithering through the stacks. Hargrove's pet project, they called me in the bisexuals, gays, lesbians, and allies house meetings, half joke, half knife. Tyler confronted me over Pong in the dorm lounge, beer foam flecking his beard. "Bro, it's the prof? That's career suicide." I laughed it off, but sleep evaded me, chased by visions of dean's offices and revoked aid. Samuel sensed the shift, became my bulwark. He'd leave voicemails in that gravel timbre. "Meet me at the coop. Bring your fire." And we'd wander the aisles of the Harvard bookstore, fingers grazing spines as if choosing lovers. One evening, amid the philosophy section, he pulled a slim volume from the shelf, Whitman's Leaves of Grass. "Read this," he said, pressing it into my palm, his thumb lingering on my pulse. I sing the body electric. That night, in his office with the radiator clanking like a heartbeat, we did bodies electric, urgent, a counterpoint to the cold pressing against the pains. Yet intimacy bred vulnerability, and vulnerability invited ghosts. Samuel's past resurfaced one blustery January afternoon, when a man appeared at his office door like a specter from a black and white film. Tall, gaunt, with cheekbones sharp as switchblades and eyes hollowed by years, Elias. The painter. He clutched a canvas wrapped in brown paper, his coat threadbare, voice a rasp of Marlboros and regret. "Sam, I need to talk." I was there, mid-review of my thesis outline, when the knock came. Samuel's face drained of color, but he ushered Elias in, glancing at me with an apology in his eyes. "Joshua, this is..." "Elias," the man supplied, his gaze raking me like a brushstroke. "The protege." There was no malice, just weary amusement, but it stung. I mumbled an excuse, fleeing to the hall, ears burning. Outside, snow swirled in eddies, stinging my cheeks. I paced the corridor, replaying Elias's drawl, the protege. Was that all I was? A younger echo, a balm for old wounds? When Samuel emerged 20 minutes later, canvas absent, his face was a mask, stoic, but cracked at the edges. He wanted money, he said flatly as we trudged to his car. For paints. For rent. The usual. And you gave it to him. It wasn't a question. He sighed. Keys jangling. Guilt's a hell of a drug. Dinner that night was takeout pho from a hole in the wall on Mass Avenue, steam curling like questions between us. Elias had been Samuel's great love, the one who'd taught him Cape sunrises and the fury of canvas under knife. He left because I was suffocating him, Samuel admitted, chopsticks hovering. Too academic, too scared to live messy. I wanted to rage. At Elias for haunting us, at Samuel for bleeding cash on phantoms. But instead, I reached across the table, lacing our fingers. You're not suffocating me. You're oxygen. We made love that night with a ferocity born of reclamation. His body a map I redrew with lips and teeth. Afterward, as snow tapped the skylight like impatient fingers, he traced my collarbone. I love you, Joshua. The words landed soft as ash, igniting everything. Love. Not lust. Not lesson, love. I whispered it back, tasting the truth of it, and for a moment, the world was just us, two men forging fire from ice. But love, as Nietzsche warned, is a battlefield. February brought the department's annual symposium, a state affair in the faculty club, all tweed and tenure tracks. Samuel was keynote ing on postmodern ethics. His talk a blistering takedown of performative allyship in queer academia. I sat front row, pride swelling like a tide, but midway through, my phone vibrated. Another anonymous text. Ask your prof about the grad student he ruined. Attached. A screenshot from an old forum post, dated 2012. Hargrove preyed on me, power trip, not passion. Watch your back. My vision tunneled. Ruined? I cornered him post-talk, amid clinking glasses and backslaps. What the hell is this? I hissed, shoving the phone under his nose. His face crumpled, then hardened. Ancient history. A misunderstanding. Misunderstanding? She says you coerced her. Her, he echoed, voice dropping. It was a him. Joshua. Ryan. Brilliant kid. Deep in the closet. We dated. It ended badly. He accused me to save face with his advisor. Pain etched his features, raw as fresh ink. I settled out of court. NDA. It nearly cost me everything. Betrayal twisted in my gut. Not his, but the world's, for painting him villain when he'd only ever been victim. Why didn't you tell me? Fear, he admitted, guiding me to a quiet alcove overlooking the snow-draped quad. Of losing you. Of history repeating. I pulled him close, our breaths fogging the air. It won't. We're different, but doubt seeded, a weed in the garden of us. Spring teased with thaws and tulips, but tension simmered. Tyler's dealing escalated. One night, cops raided the dorm, cuffing him while I hid Samuel's gift, a leather-bound journal, in my mattress. You're in deep shit, man, a RA warned, eyeing my flushed cheeks. With the prof, they'll crucify you both. I confided in Samuel over rooftop beers at his Somerville place, the city sprawl glittering like a dare. What if we go public, after graduation? His laugh was bitter. Optimist. Tenure's a minefield for queers like me. But for you, he cupped my face, thumb brushing my lip. For you, I'd burn it down. That promise fueled our stolen summer preview. Picnics in the public garden, Swan boats bobbing like lazy confessions. Midnight screenings at the Brattle, his arm around me in the dark. Love deepened, layered with the mundane. Him quizzing me on flashcards while I folded his laundry. Me surprising him with tickets to a Sox game, where we cheered from the bleachers, hands clasped under foam cups of bud. Yet Elias lingered, a shadow at the edges. He texted Samuel sporadically, "Need a loan?" and once showed up drunk at the apartment, pounding the door until I answered, baseball bat in hand. "Where's Sam? Tell him I forgive him." Samuel bundled him into a cab, returned hollow-eyed. "He's spiraling. Art world's cruel. Cut him off," I urged. But Samuel's empathy was his Achilles, noble, damning. The fracture came in April, cherry blossoms shedding like tears. I'd aced my finals, buoyed by his midnight pep talks. But during the department's end-of-year gala, a black-tie farce in the Lowell House dining hall, disaster struck. Elias, uninvited, crashed the party, canvas in tow, a lurid portrait of Samuel, nude and vulnerable, splashed across the auction block as anonymous donation. Gasps rippled, eyes turned. Samuel froze mid-toast, champagne flute shattering on the parquet. I shoved through the crowd, reaching him as security hauled Elias away. The man ranting, "He owes me for breaking me." Samuel's face was ash. Colleagues murmuring scandal. Ethics violation. In the chaos, a dean cornered him. "Hargrove, this looks bad. Very bad." We fled to the Riverwalk, the gala's laughter echoing like mockery. "It's over," Samuel said, voice breaking as we collapsed on a bench, the water lapping black and indifferent. "They'll investigate. Tenure's gone. Your future." "No." I gripped his lapels, the cummerbund askew. "We fight. Together." But his eyes, those storm-gray eyes, were already retreating. "I can't drag you down, Joshua. Not you." The first betrayal wasn't his, it was mine. In the panic, I texted Tyler, "Need an out. Fast." By morning, I'd ghosted Samuel's calls, crashing at a friend's off-campus, burying myself in post-grad job apps. Cowardice, pure and Midwestern. Days blurred into a haze of regret, until he showed at my door, rain-slicked and shattered. "Why?" I panicked. I sobbed, pulling him inside. "I'm sorry." We clung like survivors, but the damage festered. Trust, once ironclad, now rusted. May unfurled in reluctant bloom. Harvard's commencement a circus of mortarboards and magnolia-scented pomp, but for us, it was pyre. Samuel's investigation loomed like Damocles' blade, the dean citing inappropriate conduct with a student, Elias's stunt twisted into evidence of pattern. Colleagues who'd clapped at his lectures now averted eyes in the halls, whispers trailing like exhaust. Predator. Groomer. He soldiered on, lecturing on Foucault's power dynamics with an irony that bordered on masochism. But I saw the toll, the weight loss, the bourbon bottles multiplying in his recycling. We met in fragments. Hurried coffees at Tat Bakery, where he'd slide me annotated drafts of his appeal, his hand lingering on mine under the marble table. "It's not just the job," he'd confess, stirring his espresso into oblivion. "It's you. If they probe, they'll drag us both through the mud." I nodded, throat tight, but fear gnawed relentless. Graduation loomed, my ticket out, a junior analyst gig at a Boston think tank. Entry-level salvation. "We'll weather it," I'd lie, kissing him goodbye in alley shadows, tasting desperation on his tongue. Elias's shadow lengthened. He called Samuel weakly, slurred pleas devolving into accusations. You replaced me with a boy toy. Pathetic. One night, post-midnight, he appeared at Samuel's apartment, forcing entry with a sob story and a six-pack. I arrived unannounced, key he'd given me burning in my pocket, to find them on the couch, Elias's head on Samuel's shoulder, an old habit resurrected in grief. No kiss, no betrayal of flesh, but the intimacy gutted me, two histories entwined, leaving no room for my novice heart. What the fuck? I exploded, dropping my duffel. Samuel startled, easing Elias upright. Josh, it's not. Save it. Elias smirked, bleary-eyed. Run along, kid. Sam's always had a savior complex. He stumbled out, but the venom lingered. Samuel chased me into the rain-lashed street, grabbing my arm. He's broken, using me as crutch. It means nothing, does it? I whirled, water streaming down my face. Or am I just the latest fix, the straight boy you saved to atone? His slap of silence stung worse than the downpour. You think that's this? After everything, voice cracking, he cupped my face. You're my leap, Joshua. My faith. We made up in fury, sex as exorcism. Bodies slamming against brick walls in the alley behind his building. Rain mingling with sweat. But reconciliation was fragile. A truce hammered in the forge of need. The betrayal proper came swift as a nor'easter. June's heat wave baked the city, asphalt shimmering, when Tyler cornered me at a farewell kegger in the Phi Delt basement, stale beer and strobe lights pulsing like a migraine. Dude, you gotta see this. He thrust his phone. A leaked email chain, Samuel's name bolded. Confidential. Hargrove's history with Ryan T. Coercion claims substantiated. Current student involvement? Investigate Ellis. Sourced from an insider, Elias, who'd sold the dirt to a tabloid stringer for quick cash. My world tilted. Betrayal. Double-edged. Elias's spite. But Samuel's silence on the Ryan details? He downplayed it as misunderstanding. But the emails painted coercion. Late-night tutoring sessions. Power leveraged for affection. Was I blind? Or just in love? I confronted him at dawn, pounding his door until he opened, bleary in boxers, confusion etching his face. Joshua? What's this? I hurled the printouts, clumsy screenshots curled from humidity, onto his kitchen counter. Ryan. You lied. It wasn't a simple breakup. He scanned them, color draining. I protected him. The NDA. Bullshit. Rage boiled over, hot as the tar roofs baking outside. You preyed on him, just like the rumors say. And me? Am I next on the chopping block? No, God. No. He reached for me, but I recoiled. Ryan was consensual. Messy. Yes, he was engaged. Closeted. But I never forced. Save the semantics. Tears burned, mixing with the sweat trickling down my temples. You built this pedestal for us, philosophy, love, redemption, and it's all a house of cards. I'm done being your student fantasy. I stormed out, the door slamming like finality. Days blurred into numb routine, packing my dorm, signing leases for a Alston sublet, dodging his texts, please. Talk. The think tank orientation was a blur of PowerPoints and handshakes, colleagues chirping about fresh starts while I choked on ghosts. Samuel's appeal crumbled. By mid-July, resignation letter circulated, voluntary, to pursue writing. He vanished from campus, subletting his apartment, leaving no forwarding. I drove to Concord uninvited, Rebecca answering with wary eyes. He's gone. Kate. Healing, she softened, handing me an envelope, his handwriting, steady as ever. My absurd love. Forgive the man who jumped too soon. You were my everything. Inside, a pressed tulip from the garden, and a note, leap without me. But know I land where you do. Heart splintered. I drove to P-Town, the dunes swallowing my rental car like quicksand. His shack was shuttered, but neighbors whispered, Elias too. Reconciliation, the knife twisted, betrayal's cruelest cut. Not mine, but his retreat to the ghost who'd orchestrated our fall. Back in Boston, alone in my sterile sublet, I burned the note, ashes scattering on the fire escape. Love, was the ultimate absurd, profound, punishing, profoundly human. August scorched the city into submission, humidity clinging like regret, but autumn whispered on the wind, change, inevitable as the leaves surrender. My job at the think tank ground on data dives into policy white papers, coffee-fueled debates in glass-walled conference rooms overlooking the harbor. By day, I was competent, climbing ladders with Midwestern grit. By night, I unraveled, scrolling Samuel's old syllabus like a rosary, haunted by the echo of his voice in empty bars. Elias's end came swift, a tabloid footnote, overdose in a Truro motel, empty vials and unfinished canvases beside him. Tormented artist, sources say, haunted by lost love. Samuel's name surfaced in obits, a quiet donor to the funeral. I pictured him there, stoic in black linen, scattering ashes into the Atlantic, whispering absolution to the waves. No call came, no olive branch. Silence was his final lesson in letting go. Fall semester started without fanfare. I audited a queer lit class at BU, diving into Baldwin and Lord, their words a salve on wounds still raw. Dates flickered, a barista with tattoos like roadmaps, a poli-sci TA with a laugh like summer. But they fizzled, shadows to Samuel's light. You're holding space, my therapist said, a no-nonsense dyke from JP with an office full of ferns. Grieve the betrayal, but don't let it define the love. Betrayal. Plural now, Elias's sabotage, Samuel's omissions, my own flight. In therapy's mirror, I saw it clear, the power imbalance we danced around. Professor and pupil, mentor and muse. Had it tainted us, or forged something truer in the fire? October's foliage peaked, the city a riot of russet and flame, when fate or absurdity intervened. A conference on ethical philosophy at the Boston Public Library, my think tank sponsoring a panel. I manned the booth, handing out brochures. When he appeared, Samuel, leaner, silver threading deeper in his beard, but those eyes unchanged, pulling me like tide. Joshua, no question, just fact. He looked free. Jacket slung over shoulder, a manuscript under arm, his next book, I learned later, on queer resilience in academia. My throat closed. Professor, he winced, but smiled small, genuine. Just Samuel. Heard about your promotion. Deserved. Polite thunder. We talked surface at first. Weather, the Red Sox's dismal season, mutual acquaintances who'd scattered like confetti. Then deeper, his book deal, a quiet life in Wellfleet teaching adjunct at a community college. My reports gaining traction, a fellowship offer from DC. Proud of you, he said, voice low amid the milling crowd. Always was. The panel loomed, but he lingered. About Ryan Elias, I should have laid it bare. Fear made me selfish. And me, I admitted, pulse racing. I ran. Projected my doubts onto you. Absolution hung there, tentative as a truce. As the moderator called him to the stage, he pressed a card into my hand. Coffee? No strings. His talk was vintage Samuel, witty, wrenching, on vulnerability as radical act. I sat rapt, seeing not the fallen icon, but the man, flawed, fierce, human. We met the next week at the Thinking Cup, steam rising from lattes like exhaled truths. Hours dissolved, laughter over shared follies, tears for Elias's void, confessions of the lonely months. I loved you enough to let you go, he said, fingers inches from mine. And I loved you enough to come back. The words bridged us, tentative touch reigniting embers. We rebuilt slow, deliberate, no locked doors, no pedestals. Walks along the esplanade, where joggers blurred into anonymity. Readings at indie bookstores, his arm brushing mine in packed rows. Sex returned transformed, not conquest, but communion. Lazy Sundays in my Alston walk-up, sunlight slanting through blinds, bodies sinking like well-worn sonnets. Winter solstice brought snow globe magic, a trip to Vermont, his childhood haunts reclaimed. We skied amateurishly, tumbling into drifts, then warmed by firelight in a B&B, sharing mulled wine and stories. His father's grave, a simple stone in frost-rimed earth, prompted truths. He wrote, before he died, "Be brave, son." For both of us. New Year's, we toasted on my fire escape, fireworks blooming over the skyline. To leaps, he murmured, pulling me close. And landings, I added, sealing it with a kiss soft. Sure, survived. Spring 2026 dawned gentle. Harvard a distant memory. Samuel's book launched to quiet acclaim. Panels buzzing with his candor. My DC offer accepted, but deferred we'd navigate long distance. Weekends in Logan lounges and Amtrak whispers. Betrayal scars faded to silver threads, weaving us stronger, two men, absurdly human, choosing each other daily. In the end, love wasn't the storm, it was the quiet after, the faith to rebuild on sodden ground. And in America's fractured heart, amid rust belts and ivory towers, we leaped together. Not perfect, but profoundly ours.